So the current conditions, if you look at precipitation, Four Corners region in Arizona and New Mexico have experienced above average precipitation, upwards of 150 to 200% of average. The Tucson area largely has experienced above average precipitation. In Arizona, in the valleys outside of that, south of the Mogollon Rim region, it's been drier than average. And most of New Mexico has similarly been drier than average. If you look at, however, just the last 30 days, that pattern has largely been the same. Four Corners region above average, Tucson, bullseye of precipitation on Tucson, and dry elsewhere. What's been the atmospheric pattern that's set up that's delivered above average conditions in the Four Corners regions and over Tucson, but drier elsewhere?
There's no single culprit. I mean, this has been the winter of weather. We've had just a mixed bag of all sorts of stuff since the fall. In the very beginning of October, we were still having some tropical storm activity. So if we look at some of our drought indices going back there, we had a wet October. Most of Arizona saw zero precipitation in November. Then we move into a fairly busy pattern in December with some sort of storms dropping out of the north. It's just been a complete mixed bag over the last couple of months.
Yeah, December more or less brought us close to 4 relatively decent precipitation events in Tucson. Mm-hmm. And January, for that matter, has been another 3.
They've been relatively weak storms that have sort of dropped out of the northwest, and they've had a little extra ingredient to work with this year that we just haven't seen in the last couple of years, which is some of this moisture, subtropical moisture off of the coast of Mexico. It struck me as that I think our expectations for winter precipitation here in Arizona are so low that it only needs to rain once or twice, and
the drought's over.
And the drought's over, yeah. And you can kind of understand where that's coming from, because the last handful of winters, we were getting an event and waiting 4 weeks and getting an event. And here, we get 3 or 4 in a month. It starts to look really wet. But again, if you sort of back up from that climate perspective, most areas across the Southwest, even with this pace of storms, are not keeping pace, which is kind of interesting, right? So to even just keep pace and hit average, we need to do better than we're doing right now. It's a patchwork of patterns. The Four Corners have done well, and thank goodness they have, because the Four Corners has been left behind. They got left behind in the monsoon, and they've gotten left behind last winter. And then you can even go back further and find out that the drought is very deep in that area. So getting a little bit of precip up there is some real welcome relief in the short term.
That being said, though, December was pretty good for us.
I'm so guilty of this too. It rained a ton in our backyard, right? So you just assume that everybody else is sort of sharing in that. It was pretty isolated over even just eastern Pima County. And then, as you mentioned too, it's been warm over the last couple of months. The overnight temps have been high, and we've pushed up into some pretty warm temperatures pretty regularly over the last couple of months. To not be too pessimistic, it's only January. Our January, February, March, that's our good season. The better times are yet to come, I think.
Well, hope and optimism is also contained in the seasonal climate forecast.
It's true. Yeah, it's all sprinkled throughout, which is a nice thing to see. We haven't seen that in a long time.
Which still suggests that the upcoming 3 months, slightly increased chances for above average precipitation.